As I was a-walking one morning in the spring, I heard a pretty damsel most sweetly to sing. And as she was singing, these words she did say, "There's no life like a ploughboy's all in the month of May."
Well, it's a great pleasure to meet Roderick Williams, Vice President of the Vaughan Williams Society, to talk about performing and recording vocal music by Vaughan Williams. Roddy, welcome to this series. And my first thought was that, you know, when you're talking about pianists or violinists, you know, they have to start work becoming a virtuoso at the age of like 2.5. So from your point of view, when did the singing thing bite in such a way that you thought, ah, yes, I'm a soloist?
Quite late, I suppose, because I grew up as a treble. You say starting young helps, and it certainly does. I started as a treble at the age of 6, 7, or 8, or whatever it was, and sang in choirs, then school choirs and what have you. Singing was therefore very natural and very normal. Music making in general, I used to play the cello as a boy and play the piano and what have you. So it's just singing was just an extension of that music making. I didn't think that singing was anything special to me. Going through school and what have you, and then through a choral scholarship at Magdalen College, Oxford, again, I wasn't aware that singing was going to be something specific. I knew it was something, being a member of the chapel choir at Magdalen sets you slightly apart from other undergraduates, only in that you have a focus to your day and to your week. So I was in some ways, although I didn't realize it, being treated as a professional singer. I had a job to do and a structure for it. But I didn't really see that, didn't notice at the time, until some of my friends from that choir actually were going off to join some of the London choirs, Gothic Voices or Anthony Roulley's Consort of Music and other things like that. And I began to observe that this profession existed. I didn't really know it existed. So when it came, for example, to my finals paper as a music undergraduate at Oxford, I didn't take the performance paper because I had no pretensions at that time to being a performer. I took the composition paper, not because I had pretensions to being a composer, but because it was one of the things I could do, one of the things I could offer. So It wasn't until much, much later, and singing in church choirs post university and doing solos for small choral societies at the weekends, it grew on me until one day it became apparent that's something I'd like to try to do. So it was a very natural or slow burn, and I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah. So the music of Vaughan Williams, singing Vaughan Williams, when did that come into your life?
So at such an early point that I cannot pinpoint it, I think one of the first pieces I was aware of was "Oh, Taste and See How Gracious the Lord Is," with its treble solo. And I wonder whether I might have sung that treble solo. Probably not, but I was aware that it was a piece that appealed to me through its simplicity. And now, whenever I hear those intervals, "Oh, taste and see, la 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 la," wherever I am, those words and that melody comes straight to my mind. And I would have been aware of his hymn tunes without realizing that they were crafted by him or harmonized by him. So again, a very slow burn to the point where you realize that Vaughan Williams is part of one's musical fabric without having noticed it happen.
So the text that Vaughan Williams sets, I wonder, you know, with your long acquaintance with Vaughan Williams songs, what your view would be of the sort of man that's revealed if you just look at those texts.
I think he comes across as someone who has voracious curiosity. So some composers of any nationality are associated with a particular poet. It doesn't mean to say that their poetic tastes are narrow, but they have a particular affinity for one person. They concentrate on that one person, focus on that one person. And Vaughan Williams is really quite wide-ranging, and he sets some of the classic poets for example, Tennyson just pops straight into my mind there as a young man. But then also his reading goes much further afield. He famously was intrigued by Walt Whitman and really spellbound by Walt Whitman, as were a lot of composers at the beginning of the 20th century. And then his attention begins to turn. Friedrich Schove, for example, or Shove, I'm not quite sure how you pronounce her name, but I don't know many settings of her poetry by any other composers. But Vaughan Williams really, for me as a musician, put her poetry on the map. And then, of course, finally, his own wife's poetry, which is so intensely musical that I myself, as a composer, have been drawn to set her music. It's wide-ranging, and the choice of subject matter is also wide-ranging. And I think that just gives to me, it's someone who is constantly curious and constantly open, and that appeals to me greatly.
It's always an interesting question for me to talk to musicians about whether or not they feel that researching the biography of a composer is essential to performing their music. And I wonder whether that generally applies to you and whether it specifically applies in the case of Vaughan Williams.
It is a very good question, because I would like to think that a musician can be instinctive in a reaction to abstract music, and interpret it fully without any knowledge of the composer. You just react to a piece of music. There are all sorts of things that can give a performer extra stimuli when you're considering music. That might be a specific biographical detail, to discover, for example, that the composer was an absolute monster, or that the composer had a political or with a large P or a small p views that are completely at odds with one's own. Those are quite interesting for you to discover. Or that he was romantically hugely fulfilled, or romantically hugely unfulfilled. Those are things that can one likes to imagine. You get a revelation. Oh my goodness! And now I can interpret his songs in a completely different way. And those are exciting for an artist. I'm not so sure whether an audience, again, we're speaking in abstract terms here, an audience sitting to me listening to songs of travel, whether they are aware of a performance where I wasn't particularly focused on Vaughan Williams' personal life, or indeed Robert Louis Stevenson's personal biography, or whether I'm happy. Hopefully I will sing it and give them a persuasive performance in either case. I just find it quite interesting as a human being to delve into people, or, for example, to be at Leith Hill itself and give a performance there. This is something I did 10, 15 years ago. So I gave a performance in Leith Hill itself, and to look out of the window and see a vista that Vaughan Williams would have seen many times. And I like to imagine, this informs me about the way he would compose music and the way he crafted landscape into his music. Yeah, maybe not. And someone who hasn't seen that vista doesn't mean their performance is any less worthwhile. So,
Well, there you are. You demonstrated how fascinating it is to talk to musicians about this. So, Vaughan Williams' vocal repertoire that you feel should be much better known and isn't?
Well, there is one particular piece that pops, and actually a couple of pieces, another one just pops in my mind. One of my favorite pieces is Willowwood, which is a setting of Dante Gabriel Rossetti that fits into his House of Life settings. If anybody doesn't really know the House of Life settings as a whole, they will probably know Silent Noon, which is the second of that set. And it's a set of 6. And they are not as often performed as the Songs of Travel because they are chunky sonnets, and they don't maybe have the same sort of impact as something as gutsy as Songs of Travel. However, once you've got your chops around the House of Life, there exists this other piece, Willowwood, which is 4 of those sonnets that lead into each other, that Vaughan Williams set in the first decade of the 20th century. And he set them initially for baritone and piano, and then later on he added a wordless female chorus, and he orchestrated it. And as I understand it, about 1909, there was a performance of it, maybe the first performance of that combination somewhere, and he wrote on the vocal score, "Total flop," and put it on his shelf, and maybe the full score, and put it on his shelf, and it never really saw the light of the day until David Lloyd-Jones recorded it in Liverpool for Naxos, must be in the order of about 20 years ago now. And I was lucky enough to be asked just on spec if I would come and be the soloist for that. And I instantly fell in love with this mesmeric piece, just utterly gorgeous. And we recorded it. And I thought, first of all, why have I never come across this before? And secondly, why does nobody perform it? And I've tried over several years, several decades well, a couple of decades anyway, to get a live performance of it, and achieved it at the English Music Festival earlier this year, I think it was. Sometimes it's difficult to date things. It was this year, I think. It's taken that long for a performance of that combination, of those combinations, to happen. I think it's a terrific, absolutely terrific piece. And while I'm on the subject of lesser known Vaughan Williams, there's one piece that Richard Hickox asked me to record even longer ago, which is setting up Walt Whitman, one of his nocturnes, that there is a voice and piano version that I know, that's a set of 3 or maybe 4 Walt Whitman poems published, I think, by OUP. And I knew that beforehand. I didn't know there was this earlier setting. And it's a beautiful, mysterious, enigmatic piece. And when I recorded it, I had the first edits. I was playing it to some musician friends of mine and said, "Who do you think wrote this?"
Yeah.
And and not one of them guessed it was Vaughan Williams. It sounds like someone completely different. There's a small whiff of Stravinsky at the beginning of the Firebird. There's more than a hint of Debussy and Ravel, possibly Ravel for obvious reasons. Or I want to say obvious reasons, only because Vaughan Williams went to Ravel for lessons, and when he came back, his music sounded very French suddenly, and so this must date from that period. It's again a mysterious nocturne, really beautiful piece. I think that's a fabulous composition.
Completely agree with you. You wonder why that sort of sound didn't permeate his music from then onwards. I mean, that's only a personal opinion. Very briefly, Roddy, songs of Vaughan Williams, other vocal repertoire, does it travel well abroad?
Yes, or at least I hope so, because I'm about to get on a train to go to Hamburg and sing the Songs of Travel in Hamburg. Now, I don't know how often they have the Songs of Travel in Hamburg, but I'm singing it in a program of Songs of the Wayfarer alongside the Mahler Songs of the Wayfarer and actually some John Ireland. So it is the centerpiece of the second half. And I think it is hugely powerful. Incidentally, I'm setting it up by singing a couple of songs from Winterreise. One of them, Gute Nacht, in the same key as the Vagabond when I sing it. And the other one, Mut, the Courage, the 22nd song of Vaughan Williams, which Robert Louis Stevenson wrote under the Vagabond poem to an air by Schubert. And Graham Johnson has a theory that this is the song Mut that Robert Louis Stevenson heard and wrote "Give to Me the Life I Love" to that tune. So I'm setting it up with some German song straight into Vaughan Williams, and I hope it'll pack a punch.
Well, look, we wish you all the best with that, Roddy, and I think we should have a report. We should have an extra interview where you report back on Songs of Travel in Hamburg. But look, thank you so much for your time. That's been a fascinating 10 or 11 minutes. We wish you all the best with everything you're doing. Thank you very much indeed.
Great to talk to you, Andrew.
I will give my love an apple without a core. I will give my love a house without a door. I will give my love a palace wherein she may be, and she may unlock it without any key. My head is the apple without a core. My mind is the house without a door. My heart is the palace where